Hi, Rick. Thanks for coming to Atmospheric Science 101 to tell the students about your career. So I have a few questions for you. Um, First, I want to know I want you to tell us about your career path as an atmospheric scientist and how you prepared for it. So the first question, first tell us about your career path and describe your activities on a typical day or an unusual day in your various jobs. I know you've held a variety of positions in Alaska and elsewhere, so tell us about that.
Yeah, so thanks for having me, Uma, and hi everyone, and great to be here. So I think it'd be fair to say that I have had a somewhat unusual career. I was interested in weather and climate, when I was a little kid, as early as I can remember, and I knew what I wanted to do. Eighth grade civics class, what do you want to do when you grow up? I wanted to be a weather forecaster in Alaska, and I'm growing up in Southeast Pennsylvania. So for me, weather, climate has been in my blood as long as I can remember. So I went to Penn State and got my undergraduate degree in 1983. And kind of, I've been lucky in my career. Certainly at Penn State, a big thing for me in my senior year, I won the forecasting contest. There was a national forecasting contest, maybe it's still run, I don't know. And I won that, or at least the Penn State part of it. I was the top performing Penn State undergrad in that. And so that was a big deal in the sense that basically got me an interview, an automatic interview with my first job in weather. That was with a private company, AccuWeather, which is still around. And so I got an interview there, and I really wanted to come to Alaska, but at that time, the federal government basically wasn't hiring. The Weather Service was not hiring people at that time. And so I just graduated from college. I needed a job. So I was offered a position at AccuWeather, and so I took that. And at that position, so this is mostly this is pre-computer era in the operational setting. There were weather models being run, of course, and distributed, but we didn't have PCs or anything like that at workstations. So what I did there pretty quickly, I fell into preparing forecasts for a subset of AccuWeather's clients, which was mostly what I fell into was mostly in the print media, newspapers at the time. Some radio work, which is where AccuWeather got their start and really made their name in the pre-internet era. They had contracts with lots of weather stations, mostly, but not exclusively in the East. So I did a few of those, but most of my work was in the print media. And being an operational setting, very much driven by what's happening that day or what's expected to happen in the next day or two. AccuWeather was a very tough job in the sense of low pay, some difficult people to work with and work for. But on the other hand, I got exposure to weather, climate, forecasting for all of North America. And I worked with some people that were just remarkable forecasters. And I think it's maybe hard to relate how that worked in the era before weather models were all consuming. Although all of my career there's been some kind of weather models. I worked with people that honed their skills before there were any appreciable weather models. And I learned a lot and learned the value of understanding the physics of what's happening to the extent you can. And in an operational setting, that you're making decisions on the fly, and you don't have the luxury of detailed analysis all the time. but it really was a great learning experience for me at AccuWeather. I wound up being there 5 years. Started there in 1983. By 1987, the federal government was starting to hire again. So I applied to the Weather Service in Alaska. At that time, you could specify, okay, I only want to be considered for positions in Alaska. So that's what I did. And in early 1988, I got a job offer for a position in Nome. At that time, meteorologists started at one of the rural offices, and then were there until they could bid on a forecaster position in Anchorage, Fairbanks, or Juneau. And so I wound up about 2.5 years in Nome, where I did weather observations, surface observations, upper air observations. At that time, those local offices did their own their local forecast based on the guidance from the forecast offices. Coming from AccuWeather, I had a little bit different take on that than maybe some folks who generally the new forecasters, meteorologists hired by the Weather Service showing up were typically fresh out of college, or in some cases fresh out of the military. Mine, coming from a private company, was unique, I think, for Alaska for that era. And that was a really great experience. I actually had never thought about going to Nome. When I got that offer, I really wanted to go to Barrow, now Utqiagvik, and had never thought about Nome. But it only took me literally 2 seconds to think about it before I said, okay, we'll see what this is like. And of course, I wound up just really fell in love with Nome and the Seward Peninsula and the people. And it was a really great experience, and continues to shape what I do today, because I really got to see what's important in rural Alaska. And that is so different most of the time from the rail belt in urban Alaska. So it was really a great experience at the time. And it continues to inform what I do today. So after 2.5 years there, in the fall of 1990, I got a forecast position in Fairbanks, and started out as a general forecaster at the forecast office, and in a few years worked my way up to lead forecaster. So all of these Weather Service jobs, of course, they're forecasters, the Mets. They're all rotating shift jobs. And that was physically difficult. I did that for 25 years, and that is physically brutal. And when you're 30, it's kind of just a pain. By the time you get to be 50, it gets to be very, very difficult. And so as forecaster, lead forecaster, so you're writing forecasts for your area of responsibility. The Fairbanks Forecast Office has responsibility for the northern 2/3 of Alaska, as well as the adjacent seas. So we were covering a huge area. Again, very weather dependent, although with an area the size that Fairbanks and Anchorage as well forecast for, there's almost never a day when nothing's happening somewhere. It might be quiet outside the office window, but it's almost always busy somewhere. And of course, sometimes it can get really overwhelming. So certainly skills that I honed in that job were the ability to prioritize. Operationally, sometimes it's so busy that, all you can do is get what you have to out. And operationally, there's deadlines, and it doesn't matter if it's not perfect, it's got to go out the door. Go back and fix it later. So a lot of skills were honed in that kind of environment that again continue to serve me today. Starting, I don't know, around 2010 or so, there started to be more of an interest within the Weather Service in climate, which within the Weather Service, interest in climate has waxed and waned over the decades. In the 90s, early 2000s, there was pretty low interest. In around 2010, started to increase, and climate was really always my primary interest, even from before I went to Penn State. And I started to agitate for a more of a climate role for myself. And to make a long story short, in 2013, Weather Service Alaska region decided to create a specific climate science and services position. This was a position that didn't exist before. There had been before that a position that was focused on the gathering of cooperative observations and managing that program. But that was very observation focused, and my position was much more of a science type position and a services delivery. And that's really when I got to work most of my time doing this climate services delivery. So working in that translator function between the science and providing climate scale information to people, tribes, organizations that are interested and can use that. And so that was really quite a change, very much of a change from operational forecasting. My previous experience was still valuable because within the Weather Service, climate really means anything beyond what the forecast offices do, which these days are 1 week out. So from the climate science point of view, we might think of 8 days or 10 days from now still in the weather scale. Within the Weather Service, that's in the climate scale. So it wasn't a total disconnect from what I had been doing for 25 years, or really 30 years before that with my time at AccuWeather. So I did that for 5 years, and I really enjoyed it. I got to work with a lot of great people, and I particularly liked that it enabled me to broaden the scope of my area of interest in forecasting. In Fairbanks, I was very focused by the area of responsibility for the office, which is the Alaska Range North. But in my climate science and services manager position, I had responsibility for the state. And so I was able to broaden my horizon, get to work with people from areas that I hadn't worked with before, and develop some of those contacts and really provide broader services. So that was really, really great. And then in 2018, I decided to retire from the Weather Service, and ACAP, my current employer, the Alaska Center for Climate Assessment and Policy, PI Sarah Trainer, basically made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. And so I retired from the Weather Service, and this was going to be my part-time Walmart greeter retirement job. Well, that lasted about 4 days until it just became, okay, I changed jobs. And that's all, it's all good, right? But so in my current role, I really am focused on working in this translator function from the science to providing information that Alaskans are interested in. It's more in the climate realm. So I'm not working really in that the week 2 type time space, really more in the monthly to seasonal realm. And my particular focus is providing that information to rural Alaska. And I have strong ties now to Western Alaska, up and down the West Coast and in Northwest Alaska. So that's been really exciting for me and very rewarding. I think that, and then I guess some other pieces have come along. Being at UAF, I've gotten involved in some research work. As you know, I'm not a career academic, so some of it is a little foreign to me, but able to use some of the experience I've gained in my position to help with research. So it's all still, it's been a quite a ride over the last 35 years, but it's still exciting every morning you get up and like, what's new? So that's probably much more than you wanted, but.
That is awesome. No, that covers, it's really, I think it's really good for students to get a perspective on that whole trajectory. And I'm sure a lot of them have heard you on the radio, since you are interviewed all the time about all sorts of climate and weather related phenomena. So let me, so I think, I don't know if the second question I had was kind of, how did you prepare for your career? I think you've discussed some of that already. Maybe tell us something about yourself and your hobbies. I don't know if you have time for hobbies.
Can I say something about career stuff?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, so talking about career stuff and what I did and what I do, one of the things that I have been able to do, partly out of necessity, partly out of my own interest, is that I went to school. I was at Penn State 1979 to 1983. A very different world scientifically than we live in now. My first, computer programming course was the quintessential punch cards. And when I was an undergraduate, a significant number of people, they were going to do operational meteorology. And at the time, that was a bachelor's degree. Hardly anybody coming into the Weather Service as a forecaster had a graduate degree at that time. That's obviously very different now. But what's kept things fresh and kept things going is, of course, I've had to learn new skills along the way. If I was still doing things with the skills I learned in the early 1980s, I wouldn't be doing this job. And so I've had to learn some programming. I'm never going to be a programmer, but I've learned to do some. I'm not a GIS person. GIS didn't exist 30 years ago, but I've had to learn some, and I've had to learn it in the sense that it helps me do what I do better. It helps me to serve Alaskans more efficiently. And I think that is really important. Whatever you're doing now, who knows what it's going to look like in 30 or 40 years, but the one thing we know, it isn't going to look like it does today. And that not just the ability, but the interest in learning new skills, new techniques, new technology is going to remain critical for your entire professional career, for sure.
Thank you. I think that is really wise advice. And one of my goals in this class is to make lifelong learners. And again, lifelong learning is really, you've just shown how important it is. I guess tell us about your hobbies, or a little bit.
Oh yeah, hobbies. So I've had a lot of hobbies in my adult life. When I was a younger man, I got smitten by the dog mushing bug in my time in Nome. And when I moved to Fairbanks in 1990, I got into dog mushing, and I really, really enjoyed that. It was at times a very frustrating hobby. It was an extremely expensive hobby. It was extremely time-consuming hobby, and I never had more than 14 dogs, and usually less than a dozen. So, definitely in the recreational mushing category. But, when it was good, it was magical. There is nothing like, being out on a sled with the aurora blazing and you're out all alone. Somebody somewhere in the world has a photograph of me on the runners going along the side of Chena Hot Springs Road. They had stopped and taken a picture of me and my team. And so when it was good, it was really good. So that I couldn't do that now. I couldn't physically do that now. It was really expensive, but I'm glad that I did that. Nowadays, my major hobby is family history. I'm really into family history, not just in the sense of who begot who. That's just the starting point. But I come from a long line of Northwest European farmers on both sides of my family. As near as we can reconstruct, almost everybody lived within 1 day's walk of the Rhine River. And as far as I know, I am the first generation in my direct Thoman line in 6,000 years that has spent no time on a farm. Even my father, who grew up in the city, spent summers with his grandparents on the farm. And so I'm really interested in trying to document that and understand what my ancestors, the lives they lived. And certainly, we see the more you do family history, there's, a couple of things, come to the fore. One, there's nothing new under the sun, really. And, mistakes, we've all made a few. And in family history, we make them over and over and over again. But it's really fun to be able to put that together. And we live in the golden age of being able to do that kind of research with the internet. I've read probably at this point more 19th century newspapers than I have 21st century newspapers. So it's a lot of fun. And it's also a fun hobby base for my work, because it's the kind of thing you can do a little bit here or there, and gets a big chunk of time, you can do it. You got 15 minutes, you can do a little bit. So I really enjoy that.
That's awesome. And my final question is, what advice would you give students who may be thinking of a career related to forecasting or atmospheric sciences?
Let's see. Advice. Our beloved geophysical librarian, Judy Triplehorn, once told me that somebody told her once, possibly one of the GI directors, that that people in physical sciences don't tend to read widely enough. They tend to wind up being very focused in their own specialty, and I think that's very true. So advice to students would be read widely, even if it's not directly related to the paper you're writing now or the test you're taking next week. Having a broad view, not just of the sciences, but of all of the human condition, will serve you well. The other piece of another piece of advice that I would give is you really never know how the things that you do will influence what you do later or what you know later. My own personal example would be, so in around 2000 or so, my midlife crisis, if you will, was that I decided that I was really interested in indigenous place names in Alaska. Actually, I'd always been interested in that. Growing up in Southeast Pennsylvania, we got the Susquehanna River. Well, that's obviously not a name from England kind of thing. And so I was always interested in indigenous place names. And I wound up, as my midlife crisis, instead of buying a Corvette, I wound up pursuing a graduate degree in Athabascan, now Dene linguistics. And it never really occurred to me as I was pursuing this, because I was pursuing it because it was fascinating to me. But it's wound up helping me in my job today, because one, I got to work in Tanacross, predominantly Dene community. I got to work with elders. I got to see the world from a whole different perspective. And I really appreciated that perspective. It also built on my time in Nome and living there. And so even though when I was doing my graduate work, in Athabascan linguistics, I was not pursuing that this would have any connection in any way to my day job, if you will. In fact, it has proved invaluable in both my weather service career and in my UAF time here too. And I think the upshot of all of that is you never know if there's something that you're really interested in and you pursue it, it may well pay dividends down the road that you can't even guess at today. And that's part of the broad experience that the broader your experience, the more potential you have to bring to whatever you're focused on at that stage of your life.
Thank you. That was, again, sage advice. I totally agree with that. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, Rick. And we look forward to hearing from you again. I'm sure.
All right. Thanks, Uma. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.